Hello everyone, and welcome to Pokemon Crystal Zero Experience with online rules. Now, the first thing we have to get into immediately is getting a specific trainer ID. And to do that, we have to delete our saved game and then start a new game, not by pressing buttons, but by holding specific buttons. Because you see, all the screens when you boot up your game don't even really check to see if you're pressing a certain button. They're checking to see if you have a certain button held down. So if you're just holding the start button before it gets to that Suicune screen, the game will just sweep past said screen as fast as possible. And if you're just holding down the A button before the new game and options pop up, the game will also select new game as fast as it possibly can. And the reason that's important is because the randomness in this game isn't actually that random. It's actually determined by this impossibly long list of numbers that starts at the same exact point every single time you turn your Game Boy Color on and off, or Game Boy Advance. So, do everything I did at the start of the video, and you will get a trainer ID of 4973 on Game Boy Color or 4977 on Game Boy Advance. And in about 3 minutes, I will explain why that's important. But for now, let's talk about our Totodile. Now, as you saw by its stats, it is a very weak Totodile. In fact, I hacked the game so that it and every other Pokemon I catch will be the weakest it can possibly be for its level. And that's because, for my runs, I prefer a highly optimized, scientific approach. One where all of my strategies will work, even if I'm using the weakest possible Pokemon I possibly can. It won't be like a lot of speedruns you see where the runner looks at the Totodile's starting speed and is like, "Oh, I need 11 speed or else it'll suck forever and I won't be able to finish my run." No, my strats aren't going to rely on that. You catch a specific Pokemon for a specific point and purpose, and it'll do its job. Period. Now, that love of consistency, by the way, is also why I'm banning trade evolutions and version-exclusive features like Move Tutors and Buena's radio show. That way, everything I do can be done on gold and silver as well. Also, in regards to this fight, I want to use one Leer and then scratch the entire rest of the way, after removing the berry from my Totodile and safety saving, of course. See, that one Leer, it does far, far more than all the other 5 Leers would, because all the others have severe diminishing returns. Which also means that if the rival's Chikorita growls on the very first turn, it's gonna be very tough to recover from that, since even if I used a second Leer to counteract his first, it still wouldn't entirely make up for it. No, it doesn't work that way. Now then, here's about where the trainer ID is going to start really mattering. First of all, we buy as many Pokeballs as we possibly can to get our money under 255. You see, there's a time reset feature that's hidden in this game that you normally wouldn't be aware of. But in order to get it to work, you have to, 1, know the right button combinations when you're booting up your game, and 2, you need to know what the password is. And this password actually depends on your name, your trainer ID, and the amount of money that you have. That's why there was all that hoopla about making sure your trainer ID was the exact amount I wanted. And it's also why I chose the name KRIS. Because with all those variables controlled, I know that my password is going to be 838 because the default without money added onto it is 738. And since I have 100 yen or Poké Dollars, that makes it 838. So I am able to change the clock as many times as I want to, as well as the day, which is going to be exceptionally useful for getting through this challenge without a lot of off-screen waiting. But what's also awesome about that is that it also resets all clock-related events, like berry trees, contests, haircuts, all of that, even if you don't actually change your time at all. That's how you're seeing me get berry after berry after berry, because I can just get them infinitely every time I change the clock. So we get 6 more berries to have a more stable early game. That way we don't need to safety save nearly as often, because in the beginning, there's actually a lot of places where you could die, even to stuff like a wild Bellsprout. Now, are you likely to die in most places? No. If you wanted to, you could make do with just the 4 default berries you'd get without turning your game off or waiting at all. You really only need them for Rival 2. But they're still nice, just in case we get an unlucky crit in an inopportune place or something like that. And if you're wondering, well, why not just use potions? That's because I'm also banning all consumable items during trainer battles, because otherwise the entire end game would just devolve into stack a bunch of X items on your strongest Mon, use a ton of healing items so you can stay alive while doing that, and just kill all the opponent's Pokemon in one shot. And that would be boring. Besides, items aren't allowed in online battles. Why should they be allowed here? Also, say no to Mom here. If you allowed her to collect chunks of your money, one, you don't have as much control over it for time shifting, but also she's gonna splurge on pointless junk that we don't need anyway, so just say no. Also, another time shift here, since we need some Pokemon that only appear at night. Now remember that we got 64 Poké Dollars from that one trainer, so our password this time is actually 902 instead of 838 as it was before. Or 906 if you're playing on GBA. Anyway, here's our first catch. I generally save this for after Castly and Rattata, since Bellsprouts are also found here and can KO us, but in this case, we're close enough to town that I knew we'd be okay. Speaking of which, Sprout Tower has Ghastly at night, which is huge for its normal type immunities and hypnosis. That's also why I changed it to night while getting those 2 bitter berries. The early game is full of wild mons who know nothing but normal moves, so Ghastly is my insurance policy against bad RNG while catching him, and also vital for Slowpoke Well and Bugsy. Also, anytime you see me enter and immediately leave a center, that's me saying I healed my party without needing to show it every time. Anyway, Hoot Hoot leads because it's part normal type, but not super important. We can easily get by just by having Totodile take some lick damage while catching this Ghastly. Its catch rate is high enough that we almost certainly wouldn't be killed doing so. More important is its level. We want it to be level 4 or higher due to some vital damage ranges against Bugsy's Scyther and Faulkner's Pidgeotto. Nice! Next is a Rattata. Any Rattata. But they show up much less at night, so 1 time shift later, and there we go. Note that it has to be daytime, not morning. Those are different. Now we got lucky with this level, but even a level 3 would have done. After all, it's really just gonna use Tail Whip on Falkner's Pidgey, and that's it. Also, Ghastly can't hurt Rattata, just like it can't hurt Ghastly, so we're gonna have Totodile do a bit of weakening, and there we go. Of course, honestly, I probably could have just thrown balls at it without damaging it at all. I was just paranoid about how much money I'd need for the Elite Four, cause a consistent E4 requires 10 calciums and 5 carboses, and they also like stacking 7 HP ups and 9 irons on top of that for added safety. But those last 2 HP ups did almost nothing, so I could have saved 19,600 Pokédollars on those. Anyway, we want a level 5 or higher Pidgey for Sand Attack. Level 4s don't have that, so I need 5 or higher. Bellsprout. Mostly worthless by itself, but our key to getting Onix, who has Screech along with its Route Ground typing. Very vital for Falkner, Rival 2, and other early game fights. And since we got Hoot Hoot earlier than expected, we even have a fairly smooth ride to weakening it. Otherwise, Ghastly would have had to put it to sleep at full health. And now a veritable army of junk before finding what we actually want. That happens sometimes. Nothing to be done about that. And here we go. Our level 5 or higher Pidgey. Note that it can only be as high as level 5 in gold and silver. But back to the Elite Four, you can beat them in Kanto without Rare Candies, even under my restrictions. I've done it, JRose11 has done it, and I'll gladly show how it goes. But it's not reliable. Besides, Rare Candies are one of the most satisfying parts of Pokemon. So while some Zero EXP runs consider them against the spirit of Zero experience, I don't. I'll still show them, but my main playthrough is gonna be me using Rare Candies. And the version of the Elite Four without Rare Candies is gonna be a nice side bonus. Also, fun fact, any Pokemon you get via trade, as well as the Gyarados later on, actually has set DVs. For Gyarados, it's because shininess is determined by its DVs, so it has to have a certain set in order to be guaranteed shiny. And for traded Pokemons, the idea is that they add their own unique identity before being traded to you. Hence their different ID numbers. So as a part of that, they'd also have their own set DVs. Know what I'm saying? Anyways, that's all for today's episode. I'm gonna be clearing Sprout Tower in the next one, because while it's technically optional, Flash is just way too valuable for its ability to navigate caves, and also for some later boss fights. So, have a nice day, and God bless you all.